Hey, this is Dead Gamer. This is actually a video response to the Rolling Bad podcast. If you guys don't know about the Rolling Bad podcast, it is a podcast, obviously, that some guys do. It's based around Age of Sigmar, and it's a super fun podcast. I actually only started listening to it when they started a YouTube channel, because that's sort of how I absorb all my Warhammer goodness from the community. But since LVO and meeting the Age of Sigmar, yeah, Rolling Bad. Sorry, I'm all over the place. This video is going to be a little crazy. It's going to be long, so I'll just say that right now, because it's they touched on a lot of things that I want to talk about, and I actually wrote down a ton of notes. Yeah. While I was listening to their episode, but I'm all over the place right now. A, because I'm tired. B, because I've been working like crazy and tired. And C, because I haven't done a video in a while, and I'm just going to be scatterbrained about it. But hopefully you enjoy doing whatever it is that you do while you listen to my sweet, sultry voice. And let's just start with this. So going back, the Rolling Bad podcast is something I caught on to when they started a YouTube page. It's a great show about guys talking about Age of Sigmar. And this particular episode that just came out, they recorded it over Memorial Day weekend, 2019. It was about this thing called the 6 Pillars of the Hobby. And they actually got it from another podcast, I believe, called The Independent Characters, which I don't know. I'm going to look into that, but like I said, it's been a busy week. So Bill over at Rolling Bad decided to do their own episode called The 6 Pillars of the Hobby, and they're basically touching on 6 sort of key points about the hobby. So those key points are playing, painting, building models, socializing, collecting, and the lore. So I wrote some notes on each little topic because as they were doing the episode, I wanted to make a video response. Also because they asked, not necessarily for a video response, but for people to get back to them about what their 6 pillars of the hobby are. And I figured the best way to do that would be make a video and put it up on my little channel, and you know, you guys can hopefully enjoy my stories about stuff and my perspective and my what kind of gets me the most tickled about this hobby, and what I am least interested in. Not that number 6 is something I am not at all interested in. I think this hobby as a whole is amazing, and you know, one of the things that was hard for me in ranking these 6 were looking at where I am in life now and where I was and where I want to be, and that's sort of, it changes my list a lot. So this particular list, my 6 1 to 6 now, is definitely not my 1 to 6 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 25 years ago. And it's not going to be, I highly doubt it's going to be my future. So this is just my list as I currently am in this state. And I thought it was real interesting because I was forced to make some hard decisions. It's sort of, you had to pick favorites. I don't have kids, but you always hear parents saying, you know, it's hard to pick a favorite, or if they do have a favorite, they don't want to say it because some of their kids are little jerks and other ones are cool. But it felt like that. It was like it was hard to make that decision, to just say this is my definitive number 1. And I'm rambling, so I'm gonna shut up and I'm gonna get into this. So here we go. So I'm just going to kind of read. This is going to be sort of awkward because while I was listening to the episode at work, I'd pause it if something came up in my head and I just write. So these are going to be sort of, I might read them and then just kind of be like, huh, and then elaborate on it. They're more talking points for me to go in more depth, if I have any more in depth. So I said ideally I'd like to be in a place where I can game and hobby more and paint less, which is what I did when I was younger. So oh, that's part of this whole playing thing. See, it's going to be a shit show. Sorry, everybody. Let's just get into this. I'm not even going to try to go outside of the lines here, because that's what I'm doing. So the first thing we talked about was playing. And for me, what I'll do is I'll rate these as I talk about them, and then I'll just sort of recap them. So playing to me is number 5 on the list. I enjoy playing, but I don't really have the time right now. I used to play a lot more, and this would have been a lot further down in my list. But as of my current situation, playing is sort of taking the back seat of the 6 pillars, and but that's okay. I mean, I don't mind that. It's just that that's sort of where it is for me right now. It's hard to get dedicated time to play right now. A lot of my friends are working full-time. They have kids, so I'm gonna keep scratching too. I've been up in the mountains this whole week. A lot of poison oak, so I've got poison oak legs, and it's hard not to scratch. It's hard to find dedicated time. It's hard to get my time to coincide with a buddy's time and just kind of make that mesh together. It's more of a, you know, I like to do it when I know a convention's coming around, because then I have an opportunity and a reason to just not worry about work, and I know there's going to be people there that are going to want to play. And that's actually, talking about conventions, is the social aspect, so I'll get into that as well. But in regular, I consider playing just sitting down at my house or a buddy's house or the game store, and I rarely get a chance to do that nowadays. And I wish I had more, but currently, this is placing number 5 for me. Also, when I want to play lighthearted games. I don't want to play crazy competitive. I know I've talked about this in other videos, but I get enough competition, and you know, my work is a competitive environment, and when I'm home, I just want to have fun. And if I have the opportunity to play, I definitely just want to have a nice lighthearted game where we can drink some beers and have a good laugh, you know, roll some dice and both feel satisfied that we sounds like sex, right? Both walk away satisfied. Yeah, and just feel like that we both had a good time, and we told a story, or we just had, you know, a really good scenario. So that's it. They also lumped list building into playing, which is definitely something I am not interested in. I'm not a list builder. I'm not a math hammerer. I like to put cool looking stuff on the table, and I like my stuff on the table to have reason for being there. This whole, like, people bringing, you know, Nurgle and Tzeentch in one force bugs me, you know, because I am that person. And I'm sure if there was a good reason why you could do something like that, I'd be all on board. I'd be like, okay, I can see this. Let's do it like this. But I'm definitely, you know, I want there to be a reason, you know? I don't want to just have a bunch of witch elves and a bunch of, I don't know, trying to think of something. Pulling something out of my butt right now. Witch elves and, free people. There you go. Dwarves. Dwarves and witch elves. That just would be weird. But if we could figure out why, I'd be down, right? It's just, I want to know why these things are happening. And when I build a list, I keep that in mind. I don't just throw stuff in there because it helps make something better, or I ever really make my models jive with each other. So, you know, when they go, oh, well, this guy's supposed to do this to this person, most of the time I don't even know that or care to know that, or I'll find out through the game. I'll be like, oh, this model should have probably been way over there with those dudes, because that sounds like it would have, you know, and I self-discovery through playing. But again, I don't play that much, so I don't really, that doesn't drive me. So the list building, math hammering falls under playing, and this is my number 5. The next one is painting that they talk about, and I actually put this at number 6. And if you watch my channel, you will know that I am afraid to paint, and I'm afraid to paint for many reasons. I'm going to read a little bit. Painting is interesting. I love the look of paint. Oh, here we go. I love the look of painted models. Even the ones I know that I could do better. So when I go to like a hobby store, or I go to a convention, and I'm walking around and I'm looking at the figures on the table, and I'm asking people if it's okay if I pick one up, you know, I see figures that I just am in awe of and go, damn, these are badass. And I see other figures that go, oh, these are cool. But in my head, I know that I could paint them better. And I'm not saying that like those people suck. You know, I used to paint a lot of models back in the day, and I've gotten out of it just because, another thing, painting is, you know, time intensive, and that's something I'm short on. And I'm also, once I kind of feel like I have a studio, and I don't mean like I need a whole dedicated room for painting. I just, right now I've got this whole moving situation, not moving, but you know my past situation where I'm living in boxes, and you know, it's hard to, when I paint, I want to have a nice setup, my stuff all out. I don't want to have to constantly be putting stuff away. I don't want to spend 30 minutes, 45 minutes getting my space ready so I could do 30 minutes of painting and then spend another 30 minutes putting stuff away, right? That's an hour and 15, hour and a half of time, and most of it is spent prepping and cleaning up because I need that space for other things. So that's one of the reasons why. But like, I look at people's models and I go, okay, this person's getting better. This, you know, this person's, and I kind of like, oh yeah, I used to paint like this when I was in my teens or whatever. And the crazy thing is I love looking at those models, even if, because it's a cohesive force, it looks really good on the table. Even if it's not, let's just say something and this is weird. It's like, it's quality less than what I would do, but I still love it. Like, I look at it and I go, this is cool. And I know I could do better on those. Like, I could paint better than that guy or gal. But when it comes to like me personally painting figures now, I have this weird hang up. And it's not only because the time that it takes to get my stuff set up and do it, I've got this mental block. And I don't know if this came with age. Like, when I was a kid, I just didn't care. And when I was a teenager, I just didn't care. But when I got into the, you know, became an adult and started working more, and things had to be certain ways for the, you know, my job, or, you know, I don't know why it's just so much harder now for me to break that fear of painting. And it's true. And that's why this is number 6 for me, because it's this like psychological thing that I still, and yes, Doom, if you're listening, the Great Unclean One is still number 1 on the list, and he is still unfinished being built, because I'm afraid to finish him, because I told you I'd paint him first. And he will be the first thing I paint. I'm just having a hard time, man. I am having a hard time. So, and okay, we got the contrast paints coming. Actually, this is on my list, so I'm gonna keep talking about painting real quick. And I'm not trying to win awards, but the thought of getting something to look like I want it in my head is a huge discouragement for me just jumping in, right? That's a thing I wrote. So contrast paints, though they look cool, they scare me, because to me they have this they have this Easter egg look. Like if you've ever, I mean, that's not why it scares me because they have an Easter egg look, but the contrast paints don't, I mean, they look cool. They look like they're going to be used in conjunction with a lot of other things to make some really, really amazing looking models. And I know that the great painters and good painters will take advantage of their properties to make their stuff look better. And I think from just a beginner's point of view, that helps you break that initial fear of painting, perhaps, because it's more of a slap it on and you're going to start seeing more instant gratification. And the world nowadays is definitely more about instant gratification. So I think that's a good move on their behalf. But what I don't like about the contrast paints is all the ones I've seen, they have an Easter egg kind of look to them. And what I mean by that is if you ever dyed Easter eggs as a kid or an adult, if you've ever had a cracked Easter egg and you wanted to see what it looked like when you throw it in the dye, well, when you drop it in the dye, the cracks get really dark and the egg's really light. And everything's, you know, tinted, but it almost tints like contrast paint. And every time I see these little YouTube videos about contrast paints, and every time I see photos of people painting with contrast paints, unless, you know, they're like Sam Lenz or, you know, Tyler Mangle, those guys that just, I mean, you could see that they're doing some highlights and stuff, and they're using contrast paints, but they're also using an immense amount of understanding of paint and paint, how it dries, and applying paint and layers, and I mean, they're just crushing it, right? And that's great, and it's cool that they're able to get those effects. But what I'm looking at when I look at contrast paints are pretty much the slop-on jobs and the minimal wet blending kind of things, because that's what the majority of people are going to be able to accomplish with those right out of the gate. They're not going to be able to do the Tyler Mangle Skaven Warlock dude who's got these crazy red blends because he's just did layer after layer of the one red, or maybe, and he added like a couple of darker colors. But it's like, okay, dude, you can make these paints. You could probably mix Lamium medium with feces and make it look badass, you know? I mean, that's just because you got the skills. So that's awkward. That's really weird, mixing poo with Lamium medium. All right, I'm gonna get off that because if Vince is listening, he's probably gonna be grossed out. Sorry, my man. Just got to deal with it. Yeah, the contrast paints, I'm going to buy a couple, and what I'll probably end up doing is, just because I want to just see it, you know? I've got some bases that I'm, actually I don't have them right here, because why would I have them here to show you? But basically I have bases that are taking the old squares, and I'm putting different base textures on there, different grains of dirt and sand, and I'm priming them and in white. So when I get the contrast paints, they're going to have a lot of there's obviously it's dirt, right? It's rocks. So you're going to have a lot of variation in texture. And I want to buy a couple of those paints and just start slapping them on and kind of seeing how they work. And if because I'm thinking I might paint that great unclean one with contrast paint. Just because I promised Doom I'd do that, and that's sort of a cheap way of fulfilling my promise. And yeah, so that's kind of a cop-out, but shit, man. Cut me some slack. I'm at least putting paint on a model. Give me a break. So yeah, I might do that first before I ruin a $100 model. I might just slap some paints on these flocked bases that I've made. So that's my thing on painting. That's why painting ranks number 6 for me, and playing ranked at number 5. So those are my 2 least favorites, and the little rabbit ears, because I love doing all this stuff. I mean, obviously painting scares me, but yeah, I want to do more painting. I definitely do. I just need the space, and I need to just suck it up, you know. And I'll get there, I promise. Then I also wrote, just out of the gate, I felt like they have, I really like what Bill said too on the show, about 50% of getting your stuff on the table is excruciating. Then that's actually what the hell does that mean? I just said, I really like what you said, Bill, about if 50% of getting your stuff on the table. Oh, now is in reference to the contrast paint. So Bill made a good point where another reason why these paints are good for a lot of people is if you're a hobbyist who just does not have any interest in painting, or you're intimidated by painting. Like, I'm intimidated by painting, but I want to take on the challenge. I want to be ready and do it on my terms when I do. But Bill was saying, like, there's certain people out there that just don't want to paint, period. Like, they're just not interested in painting. And, 50% plus of this hobby, of the time it takes in preparation, is painting these models, if you're going to play with them painted. And, these contrast paints are going to, I think, help a lot of those people. And I wrote that in there. I agree with you, Bill, on that statement, about it being excruciating, and that these contrast paints are probably going to make it less excruciating, which is awesome. So that is that. Next one is building and modeling. And this is my number one. And I love it. And Bill and Elric were talking about, like, how people can sort of envision a model differently right out of the gate. Like, when they see the sprue, they're just like, oh, this Empire head would look great on that, or oh, these tentacles from this Chaos Possessed box set from 1996 would look great on that. I am one of those people. Like, and here's the thing, and this is kind of cool, is that modeling has always been my number one. Like, as a kid, it was number one, where painting and playing all changed ranks. Modeling has consistently stayed my number one thing through this whole hobby. And I think that's because I like to think about my world. And my world meaning, like, the world in which I see the Warhammer world and the 40K world, and converting it to match my head of what that looks like. Very much like John Blanche has the Blanchitsu. It's a very stylized perspective of Warhammer 40K, where I have a very particular, it's not far off the beaten path of what Warhammer and Warhammer 40K is, but there are definite things in my head that I think would look better. There's things in my head that I want to push and bring up. There's things that I want to bring down. Good example, I think the Fireslayer models are awesome, but I think the idea of gold being beaten into their skin is just stupid. And the reason I think that is, like, I look at the models, and this is me being, like, the way I am, and I go, well, if you had metal beaten into your skin, just like a piercing, right? Your body rejects it. It gets red around that area. And, if you've ever seen people with the piercings that go through, like, their neck and the back, and their, a lot of times it stays sort of in an inflamed, not like, it heals, to a degree, but there's sometimes, especially the deeper it is, the more red it's going to be. Kind of, it's just your body is reacting to it. And the Fireslayers, I mean, these are giant, like, bigger than utensils nailed into flesh, and it just bugs me that it's just chilling there, looking all golden happy, and their skin's all just nice, and they just got out of a spray tan, and it's like, screw you guys, this is not real, this is not cool. Yeah, I know it's not real. They're riding around on giant lava demons, dragons, excuse me, but it's just not, it feels weird to me. Like, if I want to do fire slayers, I would putty over all that stuff. I would just do naked dwarves with axes and hair, and they're fire slayers. And this whole thing about the gold and the thing, that's cool, but I'm leaving it out. You could even do like gold tattoos. Like that would be cool. Like the old troll slayers and stuff, they had all the blue like tattoo swirls and stuff. You could do that. You could say, yeah, they grind the gold down into paint, and then they sort of do like a is it hentai? Is that what it's called? The Indian ink thing where they do the crazy designs on their hands and stuff, and it lasts for a couple of weeks. I think you know what I'm talking about, maybe. I think it's called hentai, something like that. Maybe that's wrong. Maybe that's some weird Japanese porn. I don't know, but I think it's hentai. But maybe I'm totally wrong. Maybe it's something else. But anyway, you get my point. I could see that. I could see them doing that. Grinding. I just had a spider on me. It's great. Probably brought it from the forest. So I could see him doing that. I could see him grinding up gold and putting it into like an ink pigment, and they're painting it on their skin, and it's sort of like leaching into their skin and giving them this power to fight. And that would be badass. Like tatted up dwarves would be bad at that. Giant utensils and sporks and stuff nailed into their skin, just not having it. So that's kind of what I mean by I have my own version of what I think this world looks like and what I'd want. So I love converting, like chopping models up, making things look totally different. Having that unique model to me is more important. And like they were talking on the podcast about how it's crazy that some people just convert every single model in a unit. I've been known to do that, but I've also, like, you know, you hit a point where you're just kind of like, all right, these are just basic Gene Stewart cult hybrids, for instance. You know, I have to field 20 or 30 of them. I don't really want to do, I'll do like a special, I'll do like 8 of them or 10 of them, and those will be used for my Space Hulk game. And those will look different. And then the rest of them that I'd use in 40K would just be normal dudes, you know, just built up. So, another thing too is about the building and modeling. I'm not a big fan of like the newer stuff. Well, not all the newer stuff, but a fair amount of the new stuff, because a lot of the new stuff is you're sort of forced to build the model in a certain way, because when you put it together, it'll have like part of his face, and then it'll be part of his shoulder, and then his arm, right? And then the other part will be part of the back of his head, the back of his arm, and the weapon. And you like put it all together, and after you put it together, it looks awesome. But you can't just really convert those until you put them together, then you chop them apart, and then you can do your conversion. So I'm not a big fan of the newer stuff. I liked the old style, you know, like a classic example is like the Cadian guys, or their Imperial Guard for 40K. You know, they just had, the arm was severed here and it was a flat circular joint, and then the arm had a flat circular joint, and you glue them together, because you could do arm swaps. The old Chaos Marauders are the same way. They had the same circular joints. They had muscled arms with the circular joint. And I get that, well, now you're only being able to pose guys' arms like this, or, you know, the Imperial Guard guys holding last guns. But I liked that. I liked that ability to easily swap through, because your conversions, you could do a lot more detailed not detailed. You had more room to do quick swap but impressive conversions, where now you're spending a lot more time sort of chopping dudes up, first building them, chopping them up, and then trying to get like around, you know, little pieces and stuff to get the piece off, but you don't want to break the other piece because you need that too. So it's kind of frustrating the way the new models are. And they're not all like that, but a lot of them are. So that was a note. We're on page 2 now, which means we're about halfway done. And we're 30 minutes in. So it's about an hour-long video maybe. So let's see. Hope you're enjoying it. So, what does this say? It says, I'm like you, Bill. I have a 90s box that I roll with in my backpack. Oh, gotcha. 905, not 90s. So Bill talked about like having a, models to work on. That when he's sitting at his TV, in front of his TV or in his backyard or whatever, he likes to be able to just sort of put models together at his whim. And I said 90s. I have a thing called a 905 box. And at work, 905 is the radio code for standby. So when we're doing something and we're talking to dispatch, oh, my legs are killing me. And they say, they want us to hold and wait. They'll say 905. So a lot of times you'll be 905ing for 10, 15 minutes, and you do 10 or 15 minutes 6-7 times a week, that's an hour plus, right? So I started bringing in these little boxes to work that I call 905 boxes, and they're basically little stackable boxes that you get from Target. And I have a whole bunch on the floor here, and some of them are larger because you could bring, if I just want to work on something particular today, if I'm going to be 905ing for a little bit, I'll bring in a box, and this will be, oh, these don't have names because that's terrain. But here's an example. These are my Beastmen 905s. So I got all the names on there, right? Well, some of them. And they're all sitting down here on the floor. So as I'm going into work and I'm grabbing my keys and I'm grabbing my stuff, I just kind of like look over at the boxes and go, okay, if I have some downtime today, what do I feel like I'm in the mood to work on? And I'll just grab one of the Beastmen. It says Beastman Bestigor or Beastman Ungor or Gene Stealer Cults or, whatever. So I'll just grab one or two and they just clip together. You just kind of, I just want to bring the top two, you unclip these. You take that off, you're good to go. That obviously stays open because you now don't have, the lid has the handle. And you roll. You take this into work, leave it in your truck or your car. Just make sure it's not too hot because the plastic will warp. And it's been crazy hot here. It's been like over 100, which is, I don't know, in across seas, that's like something Celsius. 39. I think is like 100 something, 39 degrees Celsius. It's about 100, something like that. Yeah, so it gets hot, and you don't want to leave your 905 box in the car because then your models will warp or have the potential to. But yeah, I agree with you, Bill. Having that little box around or something like that to work on models is great. Also, converting to me is the best. That's what I wrote. I think I already talked about that and why it's the best to me. Oh, also, one of the things I do, because I like converting so much, oh, you got 905 boxes here. Boom, 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 boom. Is if you see over here, I got all these yellow labeled and all these non-yet occupied boxes. So I lost all my stuff in a fire. And I'm starting to rebuild my 905 boxes. And here's an old one. This one actually survived, but you can see the smokiness of it's kind of down, it was downstairs, but it still took a pretty, it smells like smoke. And the labels are all smoky. But, so this is my bits bins. And I organize them by armies. And I'll just put a ton of random stuff in there. And I do it for all kinds of different, or I'm redoing it. And now, because I have a chance number 2, because chance number 1 went up in flames. So now I'm doing it with yellow and red, or yellow and white. So the 40K stuff's in white, and that way it's easier for me to just visually be like, boom, Okay, I know what's happening. And if you look over here again, you see there's a lot of yellow, and there's only a couple of whites. And that's because Age of Sigmar is taking the front seat for me right now, because it's, in all honesty, a funner game, and I'm just kind of digging where they're going. 40K is already very much established, and they're doing things to change it, but it's still very much established. Age of Sigmar feels like my childhood all over again, where, hold on a second. Oh, ow. Oh, that hurt. Sorry, I was leaning on my belt buckle wrong. I had to do moving things. So, because I'm like leaning into the computer. Okay. Age of Sigmar is like, everything's new. And growing up, you know, I grew up in the 80s and 90s. Well, 40K was Rogue Trader, and I saw it develop from pretty much Rogue Trader into 2nd edition into what it is now, and that whole journey was amazing. And I'm feeling kind of more invigorated by what's going on in AOS than I am with what's going on in 40K. So that's kind of why I'm doing more AOS stuff in general. So yeah, so I got these cool little bins, and this is how I sort pieces, you know, of different armies. These are my Gene Stealer called Acolytes, and these are my Skaven Plague Monks and Plague Furnace specific stuff. So anything, all things Plague and Ratty go in that box. And yeah, so it's real easy for me to pull bits that I'm thinking of when I'm doing conversions. If I had to just have a box with everything in them, like, I don't know if you guys were Lego fans growing up, but I was, and I had a giant, like, massive Tupperware bin full of Legos, and there's always that, like, one piece that you need to finish something, and it's like a clear red 1x1 flat square, and you're like, I need that red 1x1 flat square. They used to be like the brake lights on cars and stuff, and you're just going, kersh, 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 and Legos are falling back in, and you're like moving stuff, and it's like, oh look, there's a Cheerio in there, and then there's like, you know, cat hairs or whatever, you know, and then you're just looking. And if I had to do that with bits, I'd probably lose my mind. So because I'm a very organized person, even though I'm living in a very congested house right now full of boxes, everything you can see is labeled. I'm anal retentive like that, so when I do my bits, I like to have, you know, the bins labeled, because if I had to do them in boxes, I probably wouldn't. I probably would. I couldn't. My mind cannot operate like that. So it's a cheap investment for the sanity it saves me and the time it takes, right? If you had to sift through and find a certain Marauder Viking looking head in a sea, I mean like a big old bin, you would go nuts, and you'd spend hours doing it. And I don't want to do that. I'd rather spend a few $100, yeah, it's a few $100, on these bins that I'll have forever unless another fire happens. And you know, I'd rather do it that way. So that's that. Another thing about converting, and obviously this is going to be a large, long topic for me, because this is my _1 and this is my passion, and I love it because it's the best part of the hobby for me, and it always has been, and it always will be. Is sculpting. So I love, like, not only just gluing stuff together, I love, you know, adding sculpting stuff. So I got a little box right here, one of my 905 boxes, and it's got a Jabberslythe and some more Jabberslythe bits. And if you guys are familiar with the Jabberslythe kit, he's sort of this, you know, he's kind of coming up on a rock, right? He's just sort of chilling, cruising over a rock. I got some green putty, I'm filling in the gaps and stuff. And then it's actually a tree trunk on that side. So that's the regular model. And I always like to build one just as it's intended if I'm going to have multiples. If I'm only going to have one, I usually build it a little converted. I don't go too far, but I like to twist like the Avatar from great band, by the way. Shitty movie, in my opinion. The Avatar from Eldar, he had his sword sideways, I think it was. I turned his wrist, so it's chopping down, you know, stuff like that. But I love sculpting, and here's what my new jabber scythe's gonna be. And I don't know if you can see, I've sculpted like the wrinkles in the skin on his neck. I haven't done the striations in the hair here, but I did the hair at the top. Probably see that a little bit. There you go. And then you sort of got the neck skin right there. So the point of this model is because this model is looking to what would be probably your right. I don't know. Well, this one, spines are still lined up. Look which way his head's going, the exact opposite way. He's looking the other way. And I know you're like, dude, you're crazy. But if I'm going to be fielding like 2 or 3 of these, because I think these are dope models, I want them all to look different. And because he's standing on a tree, the next one is going to be standing on this little piece from the old Ruins set. He's going to have his little arm chilling up there. Here's his arm already with the super glued rod in there. That's the one on the ground. So it's going to be bitching. It's going to be exciting. So anyway, just wanted to show you guys that, because that's something I like to do too, is I am definitely, along with my converting and chopping of plastic and metal, I have no problem converting metal. That doesn't bother me at all. I know it bothers some people, Vince. But yeah, I love metal. I think metal's great. I think resin is okay if you're willing to work on it. But like resin weapons, swords, is all garbage. Like I don't like the jabber scythe, these little taily things. I'm actually probably gonna take them off and do music wire and just do my own sculpting, because I don't like this whole, I don't know, this bugs me. This whole thing bugs me. So I'm not a big fan. But for the body, the majority, the mass of it, it's fine. They should have done hybrid, you know, fine cast with metal swords. That would have been sweet. Like the Chaos Knights. They're plastic Chaos Knights, and originally they came with metal halberds, or you could buy them with metal halberds. And now the metal halberds are are resin, and they're always all, you know, and it's like, okay, stop. No, don't. Bad idea. So just another conversion opportunity, I guess. But anyhow, so I love sculpting. I love doing that stuff. Let's see. Then you guys both talked about not understanding how converters' minds work. Yeah, I mean, I hope maybe I shed some light on that. I don't know if I really did talk about how my mind works, but I talked about where my mind goes. Yeah, I mean, I see kits, and all I start thinking of is like, you know, like Eternal Guard, the Wood Elf guys. So you see those, and I just start looking at like, oh, those cloaked heads. Well, who needs cloaked heads? Oh, well, like some Sniper Empire Ranger dudes would look cool with cloaked heads. Or, oh, you could do cloaked heads for cultists, like some Zinchian Empire cultist guys that have this little sect of secret society dudes, you know, and make this cool little war band of, and you can use them as acolytes or whatever they're called, Kariak, you know, and then you just convert up a unit of them, and you give them all the same kind of weapons. You don't, not the same curvy, crazy weapons, but, you know, if one guy has a two-handed, bladey kind of Klingon thing, you give him your own crazy looking version of that. And then other guys have swords, but they're all curvy and like, you know, Arabian-ish kind of swords. Well, you kind of create just a bunch of dudes with Empire swords because those are swords, right? So you make it look like its other thing is supposed to look. So on the table, you're like, okay, well, which one had the swords? Because they all have spears. I don't do that. It's, for me, got to be a like for like, but it doesn't have to be an identical weapon swap. They just have to have enough difference between the units' special weapons that they all look entirely identifiable, you know? So, yeah. So that's that. I start looking at Wanderer kits. I look at everything, and I'm just kind of like, oh, that'd be cool. One of my things right now is I'm working on rebuilding my Gorka Morka stuff, because next year at a convention that happens over Memorial Day weekend called KublaCon, I'd really like to run a Gorka Morka event. So I'm starting building my Gorka Morka stuff again, and I'm using the new Orc War trucks, which, if you guys don't know anything about 40K, orcs, you know, are just like the regular orcs. It's just they drive around in Mad Maxy kind of trucks. So I'm going to use the standard orcs, the orc boys they call them, for my regular boys in my Gorka Morka warband. But I noticed the Blood Bowl orc team, they have like a lot of like clothes. They have a ton of armor plating, but if you look at the models, the sprue, even though the arm is part of the plate, when I was talking about this earlier, where you glue it in and it's like half of it's on the body, the other half's on the arm that you glue in, you could shave that plate off and you could just finish sculpting the strap that kind of runs across them. Or you could even, like, a lot of times sculpting doesn't mean you're adding a medium to the model. It means you're just like a old like marble sculptor where they chisel off the rock to make the body. You do that with the plastic. You just start to shave away until you have the height of a belt, and then you cut down both sides so you have the height of the cloth, and then you shave that belt. Like, let's say your end game, you wanted your belt to be these two fingers higher than that, right? There's your cloth, this is your belt. Well, when you start shaving it down, you shave the model down, you shave the model down, you leave this giant thing. You shave these down to where your cloth level is. Then you just take a blade and you cut that big old piece of bread or whatever that's sticking up down to that level. So you're not like shaving everything down perfectly. You're leaving a big piece, and it's just the way my mind works. It's weird, but it works. And you know, so going back to the Blood Bowl orcs, is they're smaller than the current 40K orcs, but they're more in crazier poses. So in Gorka Morka, you have these things called youths, and a youth is a young orc. Well, you would think a young orc's going to be more energetic. Yes, he's going to be smaller also. He's probably not going to have all the armor plating that a regular orc has. So these Blood Bowl models look like perfect youths because they're way more energetic in their body language, and they're way more like, they're smaller, and they just, next to an orc, they look like a younger orc. And you got to shave off a ton of, it's a converting dream. Some would say a nightmare. I would say a dream to convert these guys. But I am having a blast doing them. And so yeah, that's something that I love doing too, is just shaving plastic down to, actually I got a couple of orcs here. These are boys, these aren't the whatchamacallits. But what I do, like simple things, like I just cut the leg at the waist. So now it looks like he's going full on, he's charging in, and he's like ready to swing. Like he is just throwing his knife back. And all that was cutting the leg, twisting it, filling in a little bit of putty, and then this is a fantasy knife, right? Something like that. Or another example would be, here's another one where I took an old Gorka Morka pistol, or that's a Necromunda pistol, and another just simple leg lift. And this is the static black reach orcs. Cut an arm off, made the leg pose like he's running, and it just brings so much more emotion and feeling to that model. So yeah, I got a few like that I'm working on. They're just super fun. Here's one running with a chain. You know, it's a simple leg cut, and it looks like they're full on. He is just running across the desert of Gorka Morka, shooting his gun and whipping his chain like an awesome raging orc. So anyway, I could do this forever. Here's a fun one. He's just kind of walking towards you like, what, you want some of this? You know, he's just got that cool little step, and the step again was just cut the leg, do a little putty, throw in, I think that's a black orc mace, and it's like easy breezy lemon peasy squeezy. So that's that. I'll also show you the truck I'm working on. I'm actually doing a couple right now, but simple stuff, because the Gorka Morka bases were these weird ovals. The new orc trucks are bigger, but because orcs are on 25s, well, they're on 32s now, but I'm putting them on 25s for this game. You can't really fit that many 25mm bases in the back of these trailers, so I'm just doing like trailer extensions, or the where you can see like that's just plastic card. I got all the chips cut in it. I got the rivets on there. You know, just little stuff like that. It just means, it makes so much more of a difference. You know, I put a little oil barrel here. I put these two. These are from Orc, the Jets. And the reason those are like that, because when this thing's cruising through the desert, you could have one guy standing on each side of it, so you can hold more orcs. Because the game's all about transporting your orcs across the battlefield to beat each other up. I'll do one more conversion. I know you guys are getting bored, but this is the old school orc war track. Well, I wanted to be able to put a 25mm base in the back, but you can't. So I cut the war track up, and if you see, there's a little white space there and a little white bar there. I just widened it right there. So I literally just carefully shaved these treads off, extended the base, and now a 25mm base fits right inside of that model with a little wiggle room. So now these are like independent transports for dudes. Yeah, I just love cutting shit up. I truly do. That just gets me super excited. So enough about that. It was my number one, so thank you for bearing with me and listening to my madness. But Bill and Elric, if you guys ever want to talk about that, I am more than happy to talk about that, because that's the best part of the hobby for me. So that being said, next is socializing. All right, so far, just a recap, because recapping is fun. We got playing, which is my 5th. We got painting, which is my 6th. And we've got building, which is my number 1. So now, we're on socializing. We have socializing, collecting, and lore left. So socializing for me is my number 4. And the reason being is I don't get a chance to do it that much. But when I do, I really love it. So my 1 is converting, because that's the thing I can do the most with my days. I could do that alone. I could do that at work when I have the opportunity. I can do it at, you know, anytime I can convert. So, and that's my favorite part. Number 2 and 3 we haven't talked about yet, but they're also things that are easier to do by myself and on my own time than playing. then painting, and then socializing. Because I don't, as much as I like hanging out with people, I just don't have a lot of time to hang out with people. And when I do have time, I love doing it. But I have to place this as number 4 because of how often I'm able to do it. And this goes back to that whole thing I said earlier about, you know, this list is entirely different for me 15, 20 years ago. And hopefully it's going to be entirely different, you know, in a few years from now when I have my paint set up ready to roll, you know. And that's cool. I love how it changes like that. I mean, it'll always be modeling because that's the best. But my 1 is going to stay. My 1 is here to stay. So, yeah, just like that Korn song. Yeah, so socializing. Things like going to conventions. I've been going to the KublaCon, which is the Bay Area convention at Memorial Day weekend, pretty much since it started. Well, it started off as a magic thing, and I wasn't into that. But when it became KublaCon, it's pretty much been my jam. And we have Pacificon, we have Conquest, we have a couple in the Bay Area that go on. This past year was the first year I went to LVO, and I actually got to meet Bill and Elric, which was awesome. And I did some socializing with them, and amongst other peoples. Going to flea markets. One of our local game stores in the area have like a quarterly flea market where people can bring their stuff to sell, and you know, you go and you get to pick through and find old stuff. It's really fun. And I have a lot of friends that I only see at flea markets. Like, they're my flea market friends. And it's just kind of like a little quarterly reunion. When we get together, it's like, oh yeah, what's going on? How you been? You know, did you find any good deals on this or that? What are you looking for? I'll keep an eye out for you, kind of stuff. So it's super fun. So I do love socializing. Like I said, KublaCon is a great convention. I've got a really close group of friends that I meet up with them every year. We play Necromunda, which is really fun. And you know, I'm hoping to bring Gorka Morka next year and start turning them into orc fanatics. So maybe the year after that they'll be bringing their own little war bands and stuff. Be kind of neat to see what people can kit bash together with. Not even GW stuff. I don't care. I'm not a purist like that. I mean, hold on. I am for myself, and that's just because I like to challenge myself and stay in the boundaries of the game. And I have done conversions that also didn't have Warhammer whatever sponsored pieces, but like the Cromlech and those heads and all that, I do love them, but I like to challenge myself, and I would rather make, you know, cybernetic orky looking parts from Necromunda piece or Necron pieces and orc pieces, and do it myself, and guitar string and stuff like that, than just buy these precast resin. They are beautiful, don't get me wrong. If you're not a converter, I am a huge advocate for you to buy that stuff, because that stuff looks badass. It's just I like the challenge, because I like to build, you know. Same reason why when I start painting models, I could just send my models out to have them professionally done, right? And they'd make me happy, and I'd have painted models, but I wouldn't get the satisfaction out of that, you know. And granted, I'm not going to get all the models I own painted in my lifetime. I'm okay with that. It just wouldn't, to me, that's not the interesting thing. It's not, I don't want to get my stuff painted because I want it painted. I want to paint my stuff because I want to paint it. Same thing with converting. So, a little bit of a tangent, but it'd be cool to see my Necromundi buddies getting into Gorka Morka next year at KublaCon. And LVO was awesome. And conventions in general, I don't go to play in sort of defined games like tournaments and stuff, because I'd rather just walk around and have fun and meet people and watch people play games and watch people have fun. And I mean, if it's something small, like I could play, you know, Shadespire, or I did a demo at LVO called Arena Rex, which was really fun. Stuff like that. It's just not feeling constrained, maybe that's the word, to do something and have to do something the whole time. I also think, my personal opinion, you miss out on... Wow, I think this video only, it's gonna be part 2, because I guess my recording software only goes up to an hour. But what I was saying, this is super trippy. So we're starting again, but we're not. We're continuing from video number 1. So if you are just watching this, you haven't seen video number 1, see video number 1. Going back to it, I think, in my personal opinion, at things like LVO and at KublaCon, you miss out on a lot of pretty awesome stuff if you're not, and I don't mean stuck meaning a bad thing, but if you're stuck doing a tournament and you're there for all 3 days and all you are doing is playing that, and maybe that's your jam, maybe that's like the only reason you want to be there, you don't care about checking out other companies, you don't care about watching other armies fighting other armies, that you have no interest in collecting, but you've always wanted to see them play out and ask the people questions while they're playing, and, you know, try not to bug them. I'll usually ask the other player who's not really playing, who's watching, get his ass kicked or her ass kicked. I think that's the most exciting part of a convention, is just doing all that stuff, and yeah, it's just, to me, the social aspect is huge, and I love it so much. But it is number 4, and that's only because of where I am in life, and I just, it's falling into number 4 right now, but it's definitely something I do love a lot. So I just said do. Okay, next is collecting. Collecting for me is my number 3, and it sounds weird. Like, I think about it, and, you know, so when I was younger, collecting to me was number 2, because I always loved modeling. We already talked about that. It's number 1. But collecting to me was a huge draw. Like, I liked to find certain models that I saw in a White Dwarf, and, you know, I remember it was like White Dwarf 148 or something. No, earlier than that, 120, I don't remember, 120 something, 132. And on the back it had the Carnifex, well, which is now called the Carnifex. It used to be called a Screamer Killer, and it showcased like the new Tyranids. This is before the Tyranid attack game came out, and it showcased this new crazy looking, and it wasn't new, like it actually was around in Rogue Trader. Like they came in a bubble, a blister, the hard cased plastic, but I didn't know it existed because my local store never got it. It wasn't in their catalog that they had, and I saw it in a White Dwarf for the first time, and it was called a Screamer Killer, and I was like, and had a blue head, and I was like, what the hell is that crab looking thing that looks badass? Later became a Carnifex, later became a plastic mod. Well, it went through a couple of stages of part metal, part plastic, and then went plastic, and totally looks different now. But yeah, so seeing stuff in White Dwarfs, seeing, like, you know, when people would do conversions and they would show like a super rare, you know, Space Marine in this army, I'd be like, I've never seen that Space Marine before. And then I'd start, you know, obviously this is before the internet was the crazy computer that it is now, where you could just type anything in. You actually had to do a lot more research to find gaming stuff on the internet, because if it wasn't porn, or let's see, porn, then you know, yeah, it was harder to find. Get it? Harder. I know. So bear with me, guys and gals. Yeah, so for me, collecting was really fun. It still is. I I was presented with, you know, I don't want to get all like, oh, house fire. But so I lost my stuff in a house fire, and going through the insurance process, I've had to buy a lot of it back. I wasn't able to buy it all back, but I was able to buy some of it back, and I had to choose what I wanted back, right? Because they give you X amount of money, and I could buy a bunch more cheaper stuff and achieve X amount of money, or I could buy a lot more expensive stuff and achieve X amount of money quicker. So I had a tough decision, and it sort of made me reevaluate collecting as a whole. And it's not because I felt like I did it wrong the first time. I had amassed a ton of stuff through not spending the value that it's worth, but through finding it at ridiculously cheap cost. And to me, that is the draw. Like, I don't like buying, I don't like collecting the, Bill went in about, like, he was talking about like playing cards and coasters and, you know, yoga pants, you know, that stuff has no interest. The bobblehead guys or whatever they're called, I have no interest in that stuff. So I'm not like I want these things that have the brand on it. I literally collect Games Workshop publications like White Dwarf and their books and their codexes and their army books and their models. And it's like, you know, that's it. And I'm pretty much, everything else is, you know, I don't care about it, you know. And I mean, the dice are fun. You know, I do pick up some of the dice. The squig dice were the best thing on the planet. And yeah, you know, I got my Gene Stealer Cult dice, stuff like that. The Skaven dice I couldn't pass on either, because those would be good warp markers for Mordheim, because they're all numbered, so you could change the numbers and stuff. And they just had Skaveny, and it was like little warp stones. It's pretty awesome. So, you know, I just enjoy collecting for the thrill of finding amazing things at ridiculous prices, right? And this fire happened, and it made me reevaluate like how I was gonna start collecting again, because I lost everything. And it actually made this round, well, it was emotional for one, because I lost a lot of stuff that I had fond memories of where I picked it up. And I know that sounds weird, but like, you know, I remember the first Patriarch on a Throne that I bought at a hobby store, and you know how excited I was. Found it at a comic book store up in Portland, Oregon. I think it's still there, the comic book store. I don't think they do Warhammer Outer World or Outer something, Broadway. My grandparents used to live in Oregon, and well, they passed away now. They're still in Oregon, I guess. Their bodies are there. But yeah, so there was a comic book store, Another Planet. And I don't know if that was called that back then, but I remember getting my Gene Stealer Cult Patriarch on a Throne there. And also Space Fleet Tyranids. Like, they had these spore mine looking ships, and they had this crazy looking octopus squid mothership, the Kraken. So I remember buying that stuff there, and I was so excited. And my grandparents took me there, and yeah. So I mean, a lot of that stuff had a lot of like personal memories, and then having to go back and buy it again just didn't feel the same, you know, collecting it again. So that's really weird for me, or was, you know. I've gotten over it, and I got the things I wanted back off of eBay and places like that. But I definitely have changed mentally in terms of the way I'm collecting. I will still not pass up a ridiculous deal, even if it's something I don't really care about, because like you saw with my bits boxes, I will probably just chop it up and use it for something else. So I do have, or will have eventually, one of these boxes for every single army. And the point of these boxes are, when I get something, I can put it in a box and I know what it is. So when I want to do a conversion, I can pull it out and it's right there. So like, I'm not a Tau guy, which is a 40K thing if you guys don't know. I'm not a Necron guy. I'm not. There's a bunch of factions. Adeptus Mechanicus. What are the Golden Space Marine guys? Adeptus Custodes. You know, I'm not those guys. There's a lot of stuff that I'm not that big a fan of, and but I have or will eventually, when I accrue something from that faction, a box is created, and then that stuff just starts going in the box. And then if it's on eBay, you know, and something's like super popular, like I remember for a minute those two Necron dudes, the two God guys, I don't even know their names, but they were driving a pretty good price, the metal ones, because the resin is garbage. You know, sell those because I didn't need them, and I got them in a set, and I bought them for stupid cheap, and I couldn't walk away from the guy leaving those out there. So I do. I mean, I collect, and I do enjoy, I guess, the thrill of the hunt, you know, but at a deep discount. Otherwise, to me, I'm not interested, unless it's something I truly want. Genestealer Cult of Beastmen. So, so that's me collecting, and that's why it's 3. And it's over socializing, again, because collecting is something I could do on eBay when I'm at home, or while I'm at work, or while I'm at Taco Bell just waiting for my order, you know, or whatever. It's something that I can do more often, so I do more often, which is why it's lower on the list. Then let's see, let's go. Oh, one more thing about collecting. Good call right there. I should probably read my notes. So yeah, I said minis, yes, but statues and shirts and mugs, I'm not at all interested in. So another thing too, with the collecting thing, I'm glad I'm reading this, is that for 40K especially, and it's kind of done this with AOS, but I'm just going to use 40K as an example first, and then I'll kind of roll it into the AOS thing, is that the game, GW distanced theirself from a lot of its Rogue Trader roots after 2nd edition. You know, they got rid of the squats. They stopped even mentioning Genestealer cults, which was my favorite army. And some of the stuff changed. So they sort of like cut a lot of stuff that, well, first of all, they cut my army, which hurt, but I still didn't care because I had it and I still played it as Imperial Guard, and you know, it's just hybrids or Imperial Guard now, whatever. You just can't bring Genestealers. So, but my buddies didn't care. They let me do it because my buddies are rad. I still lost all my games, but so as Games Workshop sort of distanced themselves from Rogue Trader, I stopped collecting a lot of the newer stuff. So what I mean is 3rd edition came out, the Dark Eldar were a brand new army. I didn't subscribe to that at all. I was like, nope, I'm good, not interested. And then they started changing little things here and there. I just didn't really collect any of that stuff because it wasn't the 40K I grew up with. The 40K I grew up with was Rogue Trader in 2nd edition. And I started to just collect that stuff. Like, they were phasing some things out, and they were making plastic kits of things. Like, the Imperial Guard got the Cadians, the plastic Cadians, and the plastic Catachan Jungle Fighters. So the metal ones went away, and I was like, nope, I'm getting the metal ones, because that's my 40K. So I did collect that stuff more and more, but I didn't really buy into any of what was new at the time. The Dark Eldar stuff or any of that. That's another race that I'm not a big fan of. But they have a box because I ended up with some, whatever the surfboard guys are called. So yeah, so that sort of happened. And then with this whole sort of epiphany that Games Workshop should be a more social company because their game is all about being social with people, they started to like 360 or 180. Yeah, 180, because 360 would be back where they were. They started at 180, and they started like, you know, they did the Warhammer quest or kill team Rogue Trader, and they brought back Gene Stealer cults, and they brought back the Amble, and I mean they're doing all these things now that are sort of reinventing the past, which is awesome, and that gets me excited to start buying the new stuff, because if 3 years didn't happen, if 3 years ago didn't happen, in terms of like Games Workshop sort of changing their whole like perspective and direction, you know, I'd probably still just be collecting the older stuff, and not really caring too much about the newer stuff. And now that they're like acknowledging all this amazing history that they created the game around, I'm all on board, because the Rogue Trader models now, and you know, they still don't have like space pirates, which they used to have in Rogue Trader. They had a bunch of different alien races, like cool Bob Ollie models. Just, I mean, Rogue Trader was such a great time for collecting miniatures, because of all the wild and crazy, you know, you had Eldar dudes holding las cannons, and you had, you know, Space Marines holding Eldar weapons, and I mean, it was just because it was more of a role-playing game, and you could have those guys have those things, and it was just such a cool like blend of what would be more realistic, right? A Space Marine, I know people are gonna be like, oh, it's the Emperor and the machine spirit and the gun and but you know, I'm sure if you were weaponless fighting the Eldar and your bolter just took a shit, you're not gonna just sit there and start punching Eldar. You're gonna grab a shrieking catapult and just start laying into them until they kill you. I don't think unless you're an Ultramarine, you may feel like the Emperor's gonna not let you go to Emperor Heaven because you touched a Xenos weapon. But that wasn't a thing back in Rogue Trader. They weren't that, you know, crazy about that stuff. So, went on a little bit of a tangent. For my AOS boys and girls, same thing. Warhammer Fantasy became very boring. And I never played it, but I love the models, and I loved Mordheim. All about Mordheim. And that was my fantasy fix. But the fantasy game, it just seemed like it wasn't really going anywhere. They had put new kits out to replace old kits, but they weren't really making many new kits that were new, you know, units and stuff. You know, they did some, but nothing. They sort of like slowed up. And then AOS came out. And all of a sudden it was like, they didn't 180. They just completely like alternate universe, right? But once that happened, and they were like, oh yeah, we don't have points anymore, and oh yeah, we pretty much do whatever you want, which is kind of how I always played anyway, or I did it as I got older. I'm like, I want all that old fantasy shit. So I just went on a rampage. And also, it was awesome that people were like, F this game, I'm selling all my shit for stupid cheap. Like stupid cheap. Like stupid cheap. It was a golden era to buy shit. And oh, did I buy shit. Yeah. I was just taking full advantage of those poor people who were just done. And I loved it. And you know, it was epic. I'm talking whole dogs of war armies, like 3,000 plus point dogs of war armies for like $80. No joke. Like, I wish you could search eBay, because you can only search so far back. But oh my god, the amount of dogs of war stuff that I had, and then lost in the fire. But yeah, I mean, it was exciting, and it was super cool. And it that to me is collecting. That was fun, you know. And I still enjoy it. I still like finding little things. This past couple weeks ago, I think, not even a week ago, I got so they had that Empire War Wagon thing that had the dudes at the top. There was like a guy with a man catcher, just like a claw thing, and a dude with a musket, and a dude with a Gatling gun, and a dude with a sniper rifle. I got all that whole set in this like lot called like Fantasy Figures, and it was like $6, and it had a bunch of other things in there, and it was like $6 or like $3 or $4 shipping. I was like, wow. Yeah, jumped on it. That's exciting. That's fun. That's collecting to me. Is finding little gems like that. I wouldn't, if I saw that listed for 25, 30 bucks, I'd be like, it's cool. It's up there. But to me, it's just not, you know, it's not about having it. It's about getting it at a stupid price that makes it worth having, right? Does that make sense? So otherwise I'd be buying everything all the time. And that's, I don't know, that's just too much. You'd be hoarding, I guess. I hoard, but I hoard within constraints to boxes. Okay, enough about collecting. The last thing is the lore, which is my number 2. So that being said, I'm going to go back in order before I talk about lore. And we had number 1, which was modeling, because modeling is the best. Number 2 is lore, and I'll talk about why that's awesome. Number 3 is collecting. Number 4 is socializing. Number 5 is playing. And number 6 is painting. So, lore. I actually didn't write anything here for lore, which is kind of funny. It's the bottom one and it says lore. The reason I didn't write anything is because I figured at this point I wouldn't have to, you know, remembering 6 things is hard to do. It's taking notes on it, but I figured once my juices were flowing, I got my mojo, starting to feel the flow of things. When I got here, I'd be ready to talk about it, and I pretty much am, which is why I didn't make any notes. And I mean, lore is pretty much lore, right? The reason it to me is number 2 is because, hey Meatball, there's Meatball. He's taking up the podium where Gray Baby used to go. This poor Gray Baby is no longer with us. So lore is something I can do anytime. I could do it when I'm going to bed. That sounds dirty. I could do it while I'm sitting on the can. That sounds dirty too. I could do it while I'm at work. I could do it while I'm in traffic, right? You could listen to the audio stuff, audio whatever it's called. This is Audible. Audible. This is Audible. Yeah. So yeah. I mean, lore can be absorbed, and YouTube is a great place for lore. There's a dude called Inept General, and he does Warhammer, the video game, whatever it's called. Age of Warhammer, Warhammer War. It's that video game, the super popular Warhammer Fantasy video game. Age of Warhammer, or whatever it's called. But anyway, this guy, whose name's Inept General, he does these lore rundowns on all the fantasy stuff. And when AOS came out, I was like, I am in. And I knew a lot about Mordheim, but Mordheim took place way, way, way before Warhammer Fantasy was happening. Warhammer Fantasy was way more in the future than Mordheim was. And I knew a lot about Mordheim, but I didn't know a lot about Warhammer Fantasy. And I'd say most of when I absorbed, I mean, I went back and I bought a bunch of books I never had, because the only Mordheim stuff, I mean, the only books I had were like Mordheim, the Town Criers, I had the Beastmen Army books because I loved the look of the Beastmen. And I had a couple of, Chaos books too, because Chaos is cool. But I didn't have like the High Elves. I didn't have the Dark Elves or any of that, Wood Elves or Dwarves. And I went in and I bought all these Codex or Army books, and I bought all these, novels. And the Inept General just has an amazing series on YouTube of just lore videos, and he just does these little breakdowns and stories, and it's from all these army books and other sources, and they're just amazing to listen to because he does such a great job presenting them, and they're fun videos, and the dude's got a great sense of humor, but he doesn't take it too far. Like majority, it's going well, but he'll every once in a while say something really funny, and it's super, super awesome. So yeah, you can get your lore in so many ways, and it's been an adventure. Like, I basically, when Age of Sigmar came out, I started at the end times because I wanted to know why things went down the way that I heard sort of a brief thing, but I wanted to read it for myself. So I went out and bought all the end times books, and this is when you can get like all 5 hardbacks for like $40 shipped because people were just pissed off. It was crazy. It was crazy. That whole time was crazy. And yeah, so I read the end times and I was like, this is amazing. And then I just started getting the army books and started like listening to stuff on when I'm driving home from work. Oh, excuse me, it's late. I need to go to bed, but I'm having too much fun making this video. So yeah, lore is number 2 for me, mainly because it is something I can do all the time. But it's something I don't do unless I'm modeling. So, I mean, obviously, if I'm sitting in traffic, I'm not modeling and listening to lore. But if I'm 905ing, 100% of the time I'm working on models. 80% of the time I throw on something on Audible or YouTube to listen to lore while I'm modeling. And when I'm driving home, I listen to stuff. And when I'm at home and I'm doing kitchen stuff or whatever, I listen to Warhammer stuff because it's fun to hear, and and what's funny is I don't listen or read about any 40K. Like, I have enjoyed their change and going with, getting back to their roots, but like, I didn't read about the fall of Cadia or whatever that whole series. I'm trying to see it over there. It's got silver letters, fracture something. I don't know. They had the whatever that series, their end times. I didn't read that. I haven't read any of their new books, and it's not because I read the Gene Steeler Cult Codex because that's the Bible. Why wouldn't I? But aside from that, look at Meatball. Boom, Meatball. He's got creepy like The Ring eyes right now. He's like, meh. Stop looking at me, dude. You're freaking me out. So, yeah, I mean, I just, 40K to me is just not that interesting right now because AOS is stupid awesome. Like, all these new books that are coming out, I'm buying all of them. And it's because I'm enjoying reading all that stuff that they're talking about. And even though the Fire Slayers have stupid looking sporks nailed into their flesh ridiculously, their book is super awesome. And yeah, it's been a huge, and that one series, I'm looking at it right now, the Realm Gate Wars, they had the 5 books. I don't know if you guys read those, but those books are amazing. It's just, there's so much there, and it's just gonna keep getting more interesting because it's not, I hate saying it, but it's not 40K where it's sort of already set up. I know that they're doing like soap opera-y stuff with Primarchs, and it's like, I don't really care. I just don't care. I mean, 40K to me is what 40K is in my head. And Age of Sigmar is just a amazing fun adventure almost daily, with new stories and things that I'm reading and new books coming out. So that's it. I hit this thing at an hour and 30 minutes. I want to thank everybody for listening, if you listened all the way through. Also, I'm sorry I haven't made a video in a while. I've just been super busy with work. Should make another video talking about, I went to Kubla Khan. I actually had the opportunity to play with Scott. I forgot his last name, but he's the tournament organizer for LVO, and he is a extremely amazing individual, and he was kind enough to let me play with him. That's another funny one. Play with him in a doubles game of Age of Sigmar at Kubla Khan, which was awesome. And to me, it was like just the right amount of playing Age of Sigmar, because I haven't really played 2nd edition, only because it all happened after my fire, and I don't have a table or any of that anymore. But B is just, Kubla Khan is an event for me, and I don't want to be tied up doing something, but it was super fun to push his iron jaws around the table and play with his gloom spike gits against some cheaty chaos stuff. And it was just super fun. I had a great time. So I did that. There's some other things that have gone on in the past month and a half that have just kept me occupado from doing YouTube, but I've been wanting to make a video. And when the Rolling Bad gents did this thing, and I was like, yes, I need to make spend a little time, take some notes, and just throw it out there to the world to absorb. And hopefully you guys either did some awesome modeling on your figures, or you painted some stuff up, or you got your dishes done, or you're just listening to me in traffic right now, and my sweet, sultry voice is keeping you from losing your shit and, going all Kirk Douglas and falling down. So, great movie, by the way, if you've never seen it. So, that's it, guys. I'm going to say goodnight, because it is almost midnight, my time, and I'm tired. And I don't have work tomorrow. I'm going to sleep in and go to Costco, because that needs to happen. I'm running low on a lot of things. So thank you everybody for watching. Thank you guys for listening. If you guys say something, I'll respond to your things. And if you get an opportunity, go check out the Rolling Bad podcast. Check out their YouTube page. I know that someone set up the podcast on my phone, because it's a work phone, and I'm not very technically savvy with the phones. I hate smartphones, but I have one. Well, I have a work one. My regular phone's a flip phone. But, yeah. So, someone set it up, and now I have the Rolling Bad podcast on there. But I usually just listen to it on YouTube, because it's so much easier for me. So I'm always on the internet. Okay. I'm sorry. Super tired. Alright, guys. I gotta go. I'm gonna pass out. And, you guys have been awesome. And gals. So, we'll talk to you on the next one. Rolling Bag Podcast.